Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Scotti. I am the Executive Director of the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. Thank you for joining us today, and specifically for this session, which will cover the board's support services offered to injured workers by our Integrated Services and Return to Work team. Juanita Perez-Williams, Taniqua Hunter, and Kerry Cunningham will lead us through the rehabilitative support and employment services provided by their team of licensed master social workers and vocational rehabilitation counselors. Juanita is the Director of Integrated Services and Regulatory Affairs at the Workers' Compensation Board. She has been with the board since 2018 and has over 20 years' experience with New York State. During her tenure at the board, Juanita has prioritized return to work efforts, ensuring a proactive approach to supporting injured workers challenged with barriers to employment and a positive quality of life. Taniqua Hunter is the board's Senior Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor. Joining the board in 2022, she has over 20 years of experience in vocational rehabilitation, including 17 years as a vocational rehabilitation counselor and business relations representative at Adult Career and Continuing Education Services for Vocational Rehabilitation, or Access VR for short. Kerry Cunningham is a licensed master social worker for the Workers' Compensation Board. She joined the board in 2022. She has over 25 years of experience working as a social worker. Kerry transitioned to the board after serving 8 years as a social worker at Brookwood Secure Center in the Office of Children and Family Services. Kerry has assisted many individuals throughout her career in various social settings, helping to navigate difficult systems and issues while providing counseling and support. Please join me in welcoming Juanita, Taniqua, and Kerry to the virtual floor. I now pass it over to them to start today's presentation.
Good morning. As our Executive Director noted, my name is Juanita Perez-Williams, and I am the Director of Integrated Services here at the board. Thank you for selecting our workshop, Integrated Services Supporting Injured Workers. Simply put, Integrated Services is a service support team within the Workers' Compensation Board made up of professional staff who independently and in partnership provide counseling, social services, and vocational rehabilitation counseling, plus they offer many resources. Integrated Services is the unit that guides the injured worker back to a productive way of life. The Workers' Comp Board's division of Integrated Services provides this service free of charge. It encourages internal and external referrals to its staff, and it also acts as a resource to guide the injured worker through the workers' compensation process. Our agenda is prepared for you to try and answer ahead of time some of the questions you might have for Integrated Services. We'd like to start by providing a summary of the board's mission as it pertains to providing support services to the injured worker. We would also like to describe what exactly Integrated Services does for the injured worker, and I'll do one better by introducing you to some of our actual counselors. You'll meet Kerry Cunningham, a licensed master social worker who does great work for injured workers, and Taniqua Hunter, senior vocational rehabilitation counselor, who does also excellent work for our injured workers. Both counselors will offer you insight into services that their units provide. Last, we'll discuss some of the challenges injured workers face while maneuvering their way through the workers' compensation process, and how all of us, including each of you, can come together and be an impactful resource for the injured worker. By the way, if you have any questions about our services, at the end of this workshop, we'll take questions and try to give you the answers that you need. So let's talk about the mission of the board as it pertains to supporting injured workers. The Workers' Comp Board is an entity that protects the injured worker by guaranteeing wage replacement and medical benefits post-work-related injury. And it also ensures employers comply with workers' compensation law and regulations. The board also prioritizes continuous improvement of the workers' compensation system to ensure benefits to the injured worker are timely, the medical care is high quality and accessible, and as important, the board encourages and educates the injured worker to know more about his or her rights and responsibilities while recovering, receiving benefits, and returning to work. Let's talk a little bit about compliance with the law. When working with an injured worker, it's important to know what is expected of all parties following a work-related injury. Workers' comp, as many of you know, is a no-fault insurance system. In a workers' compensation case, neither the employer or the employee is determined to be at fault. So for the most part, it is not relevant who was careless or deemed at fault. What is important is that every party agree that the injury was work-related. Also, medical and wage benefits for workers' compensation are paid by the employer's insurance company. The employee, i.e. the injured worker, is not required to pay any cost for their benefits, including contributing to the employer's workers' compensation insurance. Last, workers' compensation insurance is mandatory for almost all employers with one or more employee, and they can be fined if they do not comply with this law. Workers' compensation also has legal requirements that provide injured workers with protections after they file a workers' compensation claim. For instance, while employers are not required to keep a job open for someone who has been injured on the job, they cannot terminate an employee for filing a workers' compensation claim. Also, employers cannot discriminate against a job candidate because they have filed a workers' compensation claim. So this involves when the injured worker is actually looking perhaps for new work, a future employer cannot discriminate against them if they learn that they have filed a claim. The employer also cannot ask if one has filed a claim, nor can they discriminate against a candidate who is disabled. Last, to protect all employees who work in New York State, workers who are undocumented or having no legal status are also entitled to workers' compensation. Now let's talk a little bit about integrated services. The board is well aware that life for an injured worker becomes difficult the moment the injury occurs. No one goes to work prepared to be injured and disabled on the job. What comes next is often confusing and stressful for the injured worker, and the injury is only part of it. Historically, the board has always ensured that there are staff who are professionals, trained and prepared to support the worker throughout their injury and the workers' compensation process. From financial hardship to job training, mental health concerns, and so on, the staff within integrated services are ready to help. They include licensed master social workers and vocational rehabilitation counselors who are ready to work as a unit or individually to further a successful recovery process and help the injured worker return to a productive way of life. I would now like to introduce you to Carrie Cunningham, one of our licensed master social worker who does great work for the board. Carrie?
Thank you, Hanita. I'm very excited to be here today to be able to share about the social services that we provide here at the Workers' Compensation Board. When a worker becomes injured as the result of a work-related injury or an occupational illness, the impact can be devastating in a variety of ways, such as financially and mentally. We have social workers available at the board in all districts' offices, which include Albany, Binghamton, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Manhattan, White Plains, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Hauppauge, Garden City, and Queens. All social workers are licensed in New York State as a licensed social work, an LMSW, or a licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW. Services provided to claimants include support and short-term counseling, as well as linking claimants to ongoing counseling with community mental health providers as indicated. All of our services are free and confidential, and they are available to all injured workers. We also have language assistance available. Counseling is provided on a short-term basis to claimants whose mental health has been affected by their workers' compensation case and to those who need emotional support. Social workers assist claimants in distress and help them to cope and navigate the claims processes and various systems. Crisis reviews and assessments are completed by social workers when indicated, and social workers can also do safety planning with claimants as needed. Claimants that may need ongoing mental health support in the community, such as outpatient counseling and/or medication management, social workers are available to link them to those services as well. Social workers provide encouragement, validation, compassion, and empathy to claimants and work to meet their individual case needs. Often claimants have questions about the claims processes, and social workers provide guidance to them. Social workers advocate for claimants by calling creditors, landlords, and insurance carriers, etc., when a claimant is in need of any additional support and/or documentation to show their financial hardship. Social workers can also write case status letters to Medicare and fax them to the Medicare Recovery Fax when needed. Social workers assist Social Security in obtaining medical records for claimants, and they provide case status letters on claimants' behalf as well. Information and referrals for New York State short-term disability managed by other workers' compensation board staff are often provided to claimants by social workers. Referrals are made by social workers for claimants to the Department of Social Services, to the Safety Nutrition Assistance Program, or supplemental, I apologize. Also the Home Energy Assistance Program, shelters, food pantries, and other financial and housing resources that may help claimants depending on their situation. Collaboration is provided by social workers who work with other departments at the board to advocate on claimants' behalf and to ensure they are getting the help they need with their claims. Assistance with providing medical providers, finding medical providers, and mental health providers in a claimant's community is also something that the social work department can do. Social workers can also assist claimants in looking at the barriers that might be delaying them from returning to work and help to remove those barriers. In 2022 alone, the social workers responded to 9,589 injured workers and resolved over 25,000 inquiries. Social services has had an increase in demand for mental health support and short-term counseling. We have seen high levels of financial hardship, including injured workers not being able to pay their bills, feed their families, and/or pay their rent. There's been a growing need to partner with the vocational rehabilitation counselors to support return to work efforts. Social workers have handled crisis calls, which have included injured workers challenged with life after COVID and overcoming a variety of barriers. Injured workers often struggle to return to a manageable quality of life that is the result of financial unrest due to not being able to work. Working as a team with the vocational rehabilitation workers is a growing necessity as injured workers are challenged with meeting everyday concerns in order to return to work. And speaking of returning to work, I'm going to now pass the presentation back to Juanita. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. So return to work is another component of integrated services. I'd like to tell you a little bit about it. While the majority of injured workers go back to work following a work-related injury, many injured workers have more serious injuries and require more time for recovery and returning to a normal and productive way of life. The problem that arises, and research tells us, is that the longer a worker is out of work and not engaged in everyday activities, more likely they might never return to work. In fact, research tells us that just 50% of injured employees will return to work after a 6-month absence, and only 1% after a 2-year absence. Return to work initiatives are all about a team approach to getting the injured worker back to work in a safe manner, however, with accommodations such as alternate or light duty to support medical restrictions while the injured worker recovers. So, when you look at return to work, it is a win-win for both the injured worker and the employer. The employer keeps a valuable and trained employee, while the injured worker has a safe and supported return to work, and as research tells us, typically even recovers faster. To support return to work initiatives, the board provides resources to employers regarding return to work and educates them on how to better work with and support their employee. We try to help the employer not only bring the worker back to work, but do it in a safe manner. At the end of this workshop, we'll provide you with the Return to Work website that provides information for the employer and, just as important, the injured worker. Moreover, the workers' comp process also provides monetary benefits to the injured worker who wants to return to work but needs assistance to do so. For instance, an injured worker could be eligible for what we call reduced benefits. This is when the injured worker returns to work with an accommodation, such as light duty, or with medical restrictions. However, this accommodation results in a lower pay rate. With a reduced earnings benefit, the difference between what the injured worker was making pre-injury and what they are making post-injury can be made up to 2/3 of original earnings. Also, an injured worker returning to work might be absent much of the time due to the work-related injury. As such, the injured worker might be eligible for intermittent lost time benefits that can help an injured worker stay out of financial hardship. Last, whether or not the injured worker returns to work or not, typically medical benefits are always available throughout the injured worker's lifetime. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our Senior Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor, Taniqua Hunter, to give you insight into the board's Vocational Rehabilitation Unit. Taniqua?
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Taniqua Hunter. I am the Senior Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor here at the board. Just want to do a quick image description. I'm a dark-skinned Black woman wearing glasses. I have black, long, straight hair, and I'm wearing a black jacket and a white blouse. Welcome today as we talk about this great integrated services and how vocational rehabilitation counseling is a support service for our injured workers. So VRCs, which we often call them, are here at the board. We are located throughout our various offices, including Manhattan, Garden City, White Plains, Brooklyn, I'm forgetting Brooklyn, Brooklyn, and we're located throughout the state and more offices to come. Our department is really here to assist the claimants to go back to work. It is our goal to help them in terms of once they've reached some medical clearance and they have decided that they can return to their current job, or perhaps they need assistance looking for a new line of work within their work restrictions. The Voc Rehab counselors are here to aid in that support. The board's VRCs, we all have master's level in rehabilitation counseling, and most of us have CRC credentials or are eligible for that credential. This time last year, we assisted over 9,281 people in their efforts to return to work. So as you see, people are becoming injured on the job, but they absolutely want to return to work and get back to their quality of life. So the board provides free assistance to claimants in their journey to return back to the workforce. And some of the items that we're doing is assisting regarding reasonable accommodations, whether they have light duty needs. And a reasonable accommodation is any change or modification into the workplace that may help that claimant do their job and perform the essential functions of their task. So injured workers, we are helping them apply for jobs. We are literally helping them assist with their job search efforts. We are helping them coordinate, get connected to vocational training services and programs. And we absolutely working with our stakeholders to make connections to enhance their marketability. Some of our stakeholders being Access VR and Department of Labor and uses of the one-stop centers. This is a great way for them to learn a new skill, perhaps they need retraining, a certification, or perhaps even acquiring more education to help them re-enter the workforce based on the restrictions that they've had as a result of their injury. Our department is also aiding with resume development and also mock interviews. We know that some of our claimants have been working at jobs 10 years, 20 years out of their lives, and they may need some assistance in just getting back into the groove of looking for work, trying to update resumes, and our department is here to provide hands-on support to that population. So we are also working directly with our judges, our claims examiners, our social work department, our advocates offices, and attorneys, and as well as external stakeholders. The claimants can be referred directly to our unit. We have a shared mailbox that people can access via our website to make referrals to us. And we also have an 800 number that we'll be sharing at the close of this presentation as well, that we could be contacted to provide that support. We are, as the VRC unit, a resource hub to our claimants. We are sharing information, we're sharing resources, and we're helping to improve their marketability. Also with the disability and the adjustment to having that disability and any new workplace needs that they might have. So we often know that, when people are injured on the job, unfortunately, they may sustain injuries that may produce a long-lasting impact on their life. And we know that they may acquire a disability. And with that, our staff is on hand to educate our injured workers about Title I employment and rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. Oftentimes, our workers are able to return to work, but they might need a reasonable accommodation. Perhaps that could look like working remotely, perhaps maybe some ergonomical equipment, assistive technology, whatever the case may be. We're having conversations with claimants to educate them about the interactive process so that they can engage in a safe return to work and be able to complete their tasks. And again, we absolutely serve as a contact within the board and with our external partners so that we're helping our claimants have a safe return back to work and providing them with any resources that's going to help them remain marketable and make them sure that they are able to go back and be independent workers. Now I want to talk a little bit about labor market attachment, which is very unique to workers' compensation. If a worker is deemed temporarily disabled and is less than 100% what we call disabled, our criteria, they are obligated to look for employment within their medical restrictions in order to continue to receive their benefits. Carriers often do raise this at hearings, and it is the responsibility of the injured worker to continue to look for employment in order to maintain these benefits. A claimant who fails to make reasonable efforts to obtain these gainful employment consistent within their disability and their work restrictions, they may be found to be voluntarily withdrawn from the labor market. And that does have implications regarding to their indemnity benefits. So what is labor market attachment? So the board provided guidance on this question in a significant 2010 board panel memorandum on the decision in the matter of American Axle. Pursuant to American Axle, labor market attachment can be demonstrated by credible documentary evidence showing that the claimant is actively seeking work within their work restrictions. VRCs are on hand to help claimants so that they can understand that this evidence must be timely, it must be diligent, and it must be persistent. And they are required to document this evidence on a form that we use called a C258.1. So let's just review a little bit. What are the criteria for labor market attachment? The first is active participation in a job retraining program. Next is utilization of either one-stop services through the Department of Labor. That can include various seminars, updating resumes, workshops, and training opportunities as well. Also, participating in full-time higher education or training. Actively working with Access VR. Access VR is a great resource and offers lots of services regarding retraining, other vocational services that may be appropriate to return to work. And lastly, claimants are able to engage in what we call an independent job search. And oftentimes, our staff is assisting the claimants to meet one of these criteria to help them meet labor market attachment. But please note, it is up to the claimant and their responsibility to make sure that they are, again, timely, diligent, and persistently engaging in efforts to look for work. So that means look for work often and definitely look for work within your work restrictions so that it could be applicable to your case and your situation. So VRCs, we help the claimants identify realistic and obtainable goals to re-enter the workforce. For instance, if you have a back injury, we are not going to recommend that you engage in jobs that is going to exacerbate the condition of your back. We're not going to promote you looking for jobs with heavy bending, heavy lifting, and a lot of physical exertion. So our goal is really to help claimants understand their restrictions and also to help them to figure out a new path if necessary or returning to their same line of employment within their restrictions. And again, you're only required if you're a claimant to seek employment within your work restrictions. So the last thing we want you to do is return to an unsafe working environment and an unsafe working condition for you as a worker. So this is a copy of our C-258 form that could be found on our website. And this form is where all the evidence and documentation to support your job search efforts must be listed. The forms must be filled out completely and thoroughly. This information you can send it in, if you're represented, you can send it to your attorney. If not, you can fax it into the board. You can mail it into the board. If you have eCase, which is our electronic access to case files, you can utilize that as well. And it's important to have this information in before you have an upcoming hearing. So again, it shows your evidence of reaching labor market attachment and your efforts to be engaged to re-enter the workforce. So supporting injured workers together. This is the part where we all can help together. So whether you are a claimant yourself or you're one of our partners, we know that oftentimes it takes a village. And we understand that we may have shared participants in multiple systems, and we may be able to work together collaboratively through releases to partner and make sure we're doing what's best in the best interest of the claimant and also honoring their autonomy. So if you are a stakeholder, you may want to ask when you're doing your intakes, do you have an open workers' comp case? Or have you been injured on the job? Just knowing that information might be able to help assess if they are enrolled in our system. And if so, that is a great opportunity for you to reach out directly to our staff so that we can coordinate services and make sure we're on the same page, again, as long as there's appropriate releases in place. If there's opportunity for you to track workers' compensation claimants, that would be a great idea. We're always looking for outcomes and ways to collaborate and support, particularly around referrals, how to create referrals to your organization so we could partner better together. We also would love if we could just share our information. We have a Voc Rehab flyer that we would love to print out, possibly send to you all if you just want to have it in your waiting areas. If there are people coming in and perhaps they do not realize that we have a good working relationship together and that we can coordinate these services. And obviously, just like today, this is such a great opportunity to be here amongst you all and to collaborate and to share information. We will also love to do this on local and regional levels. So if you feel like there is a need to talk further about vocational services or social work support and integrated services, we would love to come to you or meet virtually so we can further these conversations. VRCs, we would love to participate in case conferences, right? Such a staple of the VRC world is being able to coordinate and be on the same page. So Access VR and Department of Labor, if you're working with any of our participants, feel free to reach out to us directly. We have a counselor designated for each area throughout the 5 boroughs, upstate as well, throughout New York. We would love to come to the table and give you updates, have support to that claimant. Maybe they don't understand your system, or maybe they need to understand ours a little bit better and how it relates to the services that they're getting from your organization. We want to be available to do that as well. And again, labor market attachment is really key for some of our claimants. I know that you're probably working with people who probably ask you for evidence, right? Which is really important because we know on our end that lack of evidence might have them be deemed involuntarily disconnected from labor market, which may be a loss of benefits for a period of time. So if you are working with our claimants and you need more understanding on how you could support that claimant, for instance, if you work at Access VR and you send them an appointment letter, that is evidence. If you are sending them out for referrals and they get a report, that is evidence. If they are going to the Department of Labor and just got an updated resume, that resume is evidence that could be uploaded into their file. So we definitely want to have conversations with you on how you can support the claimants in being able to document their evidence for labor market attachment, but also just a coordination of services. Many of our participants we work with the one-on-one for independent job search, and we're referring them to many community-based organizations. Not all of our participants go to Access VR or DOL, and we have to find individualized supports to connect them. So we want to partner with you as well. And at this point, I am going to turn it back over to Juanita Perez-Williams, who is going to wrap up ways to contact us.
Thank you, Taniqua. So we have a few ways that you can directly stay connected with Taniqua and Carrie Cunningham, who you heard earlier, and all of our integrated services staff. You can simply email voc-rehab@wcb.ny.gov, or you can email socialworkers@wcb.ny.gov, and our staff will get right back to you. We also have the 1-800 number, the 877-632-4996. And you can visit the workers' compensation website, where if you put in into the site, return to work, you can get information both on the employee side of the services that we provide and the education. Also, the employer and the carrier can get information on return to work initiatives and how we can work together. You can stay informed on all workers' compensation news by subscribing to get board notifications straight to your inbox at wcb.ny.gov/notify. You can also visit wcb.ny.gov and select Get Notifications on the bottom of the homepage. You choose the topics you'd like to subscribe to. You can also follow the board on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for board news, project updates, training, and more. We want to thank you very much for joining us for this workshop, and we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions.
Hi, this is Carrie Cunningham. I did see a social work question come up about whether or not a referral could be made to us for a claimant in need of support with a claim about a rape case. Absolutely, you can refer anybody to us with any issues, any mental health, psychological issues, anybody that just needs any kind of support, and we can provide that short-term counseling and support, and we can also help get that individual linked to ongoing support in the community and or support groups that they would need.
Okay, we are back and we were checking the chat, and I see we have a question regarding, hold on 1 second. There was a question that came in and said, what if someone gets a job offer but wants to keep their long-standing job? So for our voc department, if we have a claimant and they want to keep their job, that is perfectly fine as long as the employer as well wants to maintain that worker. Oftentimes we find that that is usually the case. The employer does want to keep that worker on the books. We all know it does take time and resources to retrain and to advertise for new positions. So there are many instances where the employer really does want to retain that worker, and we might be having conversations with the claimant and or the employer regarding if there's a need for reasonable accommodations. But as long as that employer wants to retain that worker and that worker wants to stay, that is perfectly fine. That claimant will be able to return back to work in their existing position. Unfortunately, there are instances where perhaps they cannot be accommodated with a reasonable accommodation, or perhaps the work restrictions are so significant to their condition that they need to do a completely different line of work. Then the voc rehab staff would come in and help them find new employment opportunities. They might launch a new job search activities, might be helping them find something completely different. Or if they need new training, we might be connecting them to a new training program so that they could go get a new type of career path for that job. But typically, if the employer wants to retain that worker and that worker wants to go back, that is a win-win situation for everyone. And that's usually the best case scenario given the workplace injury.
All right, thank you, Taniqua. I'm going to go back to the contact slide so you guys have the information on your screen if you want to jot anything down.
Carrie, I hate to put you on the spot, but there is a question. Do social workers assist injured workers with disputes rendering medical decisions rendered by the Workers' Comp Board?
Yes, absolutely. We assist workers with pretty much everything and anything that comes up. We can help them with claims issues, with cases in the administrative review division, with appeals that are happening with their prescriptions. And if a claimant is struggling with something and we don't specifically know the answer, then we certainly can reach out to the department that would be able to assist them and advocate on their behalf.
I see that there's a question about return to work. When an employer can't make accommodations after you are injured on the job and they see the level of disability, I believe you're asking, can the employer continue to try and be of assistance? Absolutely. And that's what our staff can help the employer with. We know that especially with small business, employers with very few employees sometimes can have a difficult time trying to create a position for the injured worker to have them return to work. And we'll do our best to attempt to see if we can go over the job skills of that particular role that the injured worker was in, and what perhaps with restrictions the injured worker could possibly do within the employer's business. If not, we'll offer alternatives to try and see if we can support the injured worker either in another role or demonstrating that in fact they cannot return to work at that time. So we'll do our best to work with the employer and offer the service that we can.
I just wanted to piggyback on Juanita's comment too regarding reasonable accommodations. There are times when employers are unable to make a reasonable accommodation because perhaps the accommodation is an essential function of the job. So we do have to educate the claimants that if, let's say, some of the duties include mopping, sweeping, lifting, and that is an essential requirement for that job to be performed at that business. And the claimant can no longer perform those duties because they are necessary for the job itself. We do have to indicate to them that there are times where the accommodation may not be able to be supported. So we might have to look at, is there another job that this person could do at that company? Is there something else that they might be able to perform? Or can we look at the job description itself and perhaps look at some non-essential tasks and maybe do some job restructuring? And if those things aren't possible, then we would have to help claimants find a totally new line of work. But there are instances based on the needs of the business, and if it is an essential function of the job, that accommodation may not be supported.
I also see a question here asking, can you explain more of what intermittent lost time benefits by claimants, what they are entitled to? With this particular type of benefit, we're talking about when an employee, an injured worker, often has to take time off for doctor's appointments or other types of appointments regarding the injury. Also, this particular benefit involves an injured worker only working on a part-time basis. And this is a benefit that is awarded to the injured worker under those circumstances.
I do see a question here about if you are unable to drive or get to public transportation, what transportation services can be received to go to medical providers. A lot of times our claimants will have Medicaid, and they do have transportation programs available. So if you Google that and look it up and give them a call, sometimes they can do that. We also have what's called a C-257 form for mileage reimbursement that claimants can fill out for their doctor's appointments if they have somebody drive them to those appointments as well.
All right, thank you, Carrie. That seems to be all the questions we have. So thank you for your participation. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'm now going to turn it back over to our Executive Director, Stephen Scotti.
Thank you, Adam. Before we sign off, I would like to thank Juanita, Taniqua, and Kerry, and to everyone joining us today. We hope you found this presentation and discussion very helpful. We will be providing you with materials from this session, including a recording in the very near future. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out by emailing outreach@wcb.ny.gov. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.